All right, what's up, guys? Welcome to Better Globally. Today is a special day. We have James here from Freedom Files. James, you're actually my first remote podcast, so it's an honor for sure. And also my first person that I got from Twitter. And I've been like really into the Twitter community, so I really appreciate you hopping on. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome,
Uh,
Ben. Glad to be here.
Could you give people a quick introduction, just a few sentences about you so they can get a more clear idea before we get started?
Yeah, as far as your audience and the Better Globally audience cares, I'm 26 years old. About 2 years ago, I quit my job. 3 days later, I started my own business, which is kind of a risk for a risk-averse person like me. And about 6 months later, I left my home country of the United States. Again, another big risk. Most people would say that's a risk. And have lived in 7 countries here in Latin America over the last 2 years, but really settled in on Colombia, where I now live. Have grown my business to a sizable size and have started another business. So I'm sure we'll go down a couple different angles as it relates to travel, building a life of freedom, and entrepreneurship.
Yeah, absolutely. So my first question is like, since you said that you have been historically a risk-averse person, like what really changed your mindset in terms of taking a risk? Because like if you were risk-averse and then you just like said, fuck it, I'm quitting my job, moving to Colombia, that's a pretty big move.
Yeah, and I've talked about this pretty publicly. It's really the first step in the process that I try to teach people in order to get closer to their dream life, their free life. And that was a little bit more than 2 years ago now. I wrote my obituary. And to most people, that sounds like a super morbid exercise to imagine yourself on your deathbed, having to write your own obituary, and what that life looked like. So I pictured that I was 95. I had this family around me. I had homes around the world. I owned multiple businesses. I was wealthy. I had made a big impact on the world. And in that moment in my life, when I was writing this obituary, this very like fantastical obituary, I wasn't living out a lot of those things that I had written down. So that told me that I had to make a lot of changes. And in order to live the life that I wanted to live, some risks had to be taken. And that is what originally led me to quit my job and then 3 days later start my own business with really zero plan. But that was the obituary was definitely the catalyst in that whole process.
Oh yeah, I mean, honestly, do you often think about death?
Do I often think about death? I probably think about death a little bit more than the average person. I'm a big fan of Ryan Holiday. And if you know who Ryan Holiday is, he's a prolific marketer. He's a prolific author. And he founded many businesses, but probably the most famous one around Stoicism. And his book, The Daily Stoic, really changed my life a few years ago when I first began to imagine my mortality and think about what I want to achieve by the time I die. Like I said, I think about it a little bit more than the average person, but probably not as much as I should. I should think about my mortality every day because then I would take daily risks and I would do a lot harder stuff every single day because what if I pass away the next day?
Very true. I totally feel you in terms of taking risks. I always ask, whenever there's some kind of risk that I need to take, I always ask myself the question, am I going to die? And usually the answer is no. So as long as the answer is no, I know whatever the consequences, whatever is going to happen next, I know I can figure it out. So for anyone listening, ask yourself this question. You can figure out whatever you want to do. So
Yeah, and Ben, if I can step in there and add another question to ask yourself, that would be, what is the worst that could happen?
Go on.
For example, a lot of people get tripped up when starting their own business, or applying to that job that scares them a little bit, or talking to that girl at the bar who seems a little bit out of their league. All those things. What happens if you fail? Really nothing.
Yeah.
So it mitigates the risk in your mind, and therefore allows you to take bigger risks because you imagine the result.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, I wanted to tell you, I heard that you went to Miami University in Ohio. So I guess we have some commonalities. I mean, I didn't go there. However, my fraternity, Phi Delta Theta, was founded there. So I know a little bit about Miami University. And now I want to ask you about, you said that you lived in North Dakota for most of your life, and now you live in Colombia, you traveled Latin America. And I'm wondering, was there a person or a specific event that really opened up your eyes to the world, and that there's something more? Because I would think that if you live in North Dakota, people usually are not so open-minded. They don't really think about going to Latin America, make such a big move. They're more like conservative in their views. So was there like a person or an event that opened your eyes for that?
That's a really good question, and people don't usually relate those two things. I did grow up in North Dakota. However, I wasn't from there. I was born in Wisconsin, grew up in North Dakota, which, you're right, it's a little bit more conservative. Most of the people there, most of my friends, they're born there, their parents are from there, they go to school there, they marry there, they have kids there, they work there, and then they die there. That's how it works, and that's okay. For a lot of people, that's how they want to live their lives. That's the more conservative lifestyle that you're talking about. However, I wasn't from there, so it was a little foreign to me, that lifestyle. I did bounce around the rest of the Midwest before coming down here to Latin America, but I was lucky enough to grow up in an upper middle class household, and we were well traveled. I had the opportunity to go to Europe. We often went to Mexico and the Caribbean for vacations and stuff like that. So my mind was open, and I had traveled around the United States and Canada. My mind was open, probably more so than people think when I say that I'm from North Dakota. And another thing I'll add is that there are a lot of similarities, culturally speaking, between my experience here in Latin America and that which you would find in North Dakota, for example. Very family-oriented, conservative, not politically speaking, but conservative, traditionally speaking, values-oriented, family-oriented. People don't really realize that there can be similarities between such distant lands like North Dakota and Colombia, which feel like half a world away, but the cultures are actually very similar.
I'm glad you said that, because I see a pattern, between people being open-minded and traveling. The more people travel, the more open-minded they are. So since you traveled to Caribbean, you went to Europe multiple times, probably different countries, you got to see the world. And I think this is what really opens people's minds, because usually when you talk to people that are really close-minded, they would never leave their home city, or if they go to just a different state. That's what happens, because they never traveled outside of their area, let's say. That's why they're so much in their comfort zone. Which is also if this is the way you want to live your life, absolutely. But not everybody's made for that.
Yeah, exactly. And I will say also, because I grew up in an environment like that, a little bit more conservative environment in North Dakota and around the Midwest, I think that also attracted me to Colombia. For example, here, I find it really important that I'm around people who say hi to me on the sidewalk. I find it really important that I'm surrounded by people who are warm and friendly and kind and welcoming. Compare that to another Latin city like Buenos Aires, Argentina, where the people are much colder. They have a heavy European influence. It's very Italian there. So you would think that would be a little bit warmer, but it's not. At least in my experience in Latin America, the people in Colombia are the warmest, kindest, friendliest people. And I think because I grew up in the Midwest, that really appeals to me. That really is attractive to me. So I might explain a little bit why I found myself so welcome here in Colombia.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually had a pleasure to visit Colombia as well. I went to Cartagena, and based on what I've heard, this wasn't your favorite city. Not the best experience. I mean, listen, I want to explore more of Colombia. It's such a beautiful country. The first time I got there, I totally agree with you. People are just so welcoming, and just in general, like you get there and you just feel this like positive energy radiating from people, and it's just so welcoming. I loved it there. I definitely plan on going back. It's beautiful. So tell me, in your interview with Francisco, you were touching on the topic of happiness. So you said that there's a difference between being happy and being content. Could you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Yeah, I think that's a really important distinction that a lot of people don't make. When I wrote my obituary, and that's the reason that came up in the interview, I was content. I had, by any stretch of the imagination, by any measures, societal measures, I had a good job. I had good benefits. I had a great boss who was almost like a father figure to me. I had a very supportive community around me, a network of really, really good friends, a great social life, and a good business network. But that was it. I knew that there was always more. I knew that I had always wanted to explore the world. I knew that I had always wanted to build my own business. And if I were successful in those things, those would have made me beyond happy. And I hadn't had the opportunity, I hadn't tested myself enough to see whether those are real possibilities. So that's why I say that I was content versus happy. And in that interview, actually, I had actually rewind a little bit before this. I had the opportunity to meet Francisco in person in South Florida before we got on the podcast. And something that he shared to me really stuck with me. And that was some insights that he pulled from a book about the comfort crisis. I think the book is called Comfort Crisis, where people today get so wrapped up in their day-to-day, they get so comfortable with their circumstances that they're not willing to push the envelope. They're not willing to take the extra risks enough to get out of their comfort zone, enough to learn more about themselves and the world around them. And that stuck with me. I wish I had heard that 3 years prior, so that those risks that I did take 2 years ago felt a lot easier. But I think that's true. I think a lot of young people, you and I included, Ben, and older people as well, were comfortable. And I think that's very similar to content. We're comfortable in our ways. We're comfortable with our jobs. They're good enough. But what if we took that extra step to be supremely happy? What if we took that extra step to accomplish the things that we had always imagined that we could do, instead of just being okay with things, just being content with things, just being comfortable with things? I think there's a big difference between that comfort and putting yourself out of your comfort zone to give yourself the opportunity to be even happier.
I think this is where the life actually starts, when you actually get out of your comfort zone. The life of your home, in your hometown, with all the people that you know, with the city you know, it is comfortable. But I feel like people don't realize it, that there's so much outside of that. I also had a big move in my life. I lived in Poland for 20 years basically, and then moved to United States, here to Miami for university. And it's been such a big culture shock, but honestly, this was the best decision I could have ever made in my life. Just being here, this whole experience so far, it's been 3 years, taught me so much. I'm a completely different person. Now I'm on to, bigger, finer things. Maybe also move to Latin America. That would be great. I see more and more possibilities and just opportunities there.
And Ben, what would have happened if you didn't take that risk?
I wouldn't die for sure. No, I mean, if I didn't take that risk, I would probably be, like you said, content. I would be comfortable in my situation. I would probably find a job, but always in the back of my mind, there will be a thought, there must be more to life. I don't want to be stuck in the same place with the same people that are close-minded. I want to surround myself with people who think bigger, who know that there's more to the world. And just in general, I think traveling opens up your eyes to more opportunities. And also coming from Poland to Miami specifically, it's also not just American culture, but it's also a lot of Latin culture. So I got to learn about both. I'm super happy. It's just the Latin culture taught me to explore more, because there's so much more to the world in general. I love it here, man. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, I'm glad you do. I was thinking about something while you were talking about your experience, and that I think it's our obligation to fulfill our potential. And if we're simply content in the current state of our life, of our circumstances, and we're comfortable in those circumstances, then we cap our potential. We get so comfortable that we're not willing to push the boundaries to live the life that we were always destined to live, and that's fulfilling your potential. So you think about like a battery pack. Battery pack has a certain amount of capacity, right? Most people are at, I don't know, maybe hover between 50 and 100% of that battery pack in terms of their potential, their willingness to fulfill their potential. When you start taking risks, calculated risks, and getting outside of your comfort zone, it's almost like attaching another battery supplement to that battery pack and giving your battery bar an extra 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%, 50% than you ever had before. Otherwise, you're limited. You have a limited potential, and people might butt up to the top of that potential, but they're not going to go anywhere near the 110%, 120%, 130% that they're probably able to get to if they just took that extra jump or took that extra risk. So you're coming to Miami from Poland was probably that first big step for you that opened up a whole new package of opportunities and benefits to your life that you would have never realized had you stayed in Poland.
Absolutely. Actually, when you said that, it made me realize I think I was missing this word potential. I just felt like I have potential for more, and if I knew that if I stay there, this potential would be unfulfilled. Also, going back to transitioning between countries, I personally, when I was moving to States, my mom, every time we talked about this whole thing, she was crying every single time. Oh, you're gonna leave me here, you're gonna be there by yourself. I honestly wasn't worried until I moved there. How was your experience in that? Were you stressed about moving? What did your parents think? Were you scared? What did you feel in that moment?
You're bringing me back. I have not lived at home since I was 18, like many Americans have not. If you get outside of the United States, you realize that is not very normal, where people leave the home at 18. It's very normal in the United States, not so normal elsewhere in the world.
Agreed.
I am extremely close with my mom and I'm extremely close with my dad. We're lucky to have the relationship that we do have, given that I have not lived with them since I was 18. When I made the leap to Latin America when I was 24, so 6 years after that, it was celebrated that I was, like I said, going out on a limb to go and live my dreams. I had always wanted to explore the world. I didn't get to do that during college. I didn't get to do that in like a gap year or gap summer after graduating college. I had always wanted to do that, and I had always wanted to start my own business, and I was doing both of those things at the same time. So they knew that I was chasing something that I had always wanted to chase. For that reason, they were very happy for me. I think it was difficult for a lot of my relatives outside of my mom and dad and my brothers to believe that I would be as happy there as I was in the United States. Just because some of that stuff that you mentioned before, maybe closed-mindedness, I wouldn't say that. They just didn't know. They just didn't. The uncertainty can be anxiety promoting. That's not the right word, but anxiety increasing. And I totally believe that. I understand where that came from. For example, my grandpa used to be so worried that he would call me just out of nowhere and say, "Are you sure you want to do this? Are you going to be safe there? Do you know anybody there? What kind of precautions are you taking?" All these kinds of different questions. And bless his heart, I loved him for that because he was caring about me and he was loving me. It was just about believing in myself. And as long as people saw that in me, they were excited for me and they were happy for me. So I didn't have any issues with that with my family. They knew that I was on my journey.
Did they think that you're going to come back? And come back in a sense of, I'm going to go live there for a bit and then come back to North Dakota, Wisconsin, wherever it could be?
I thought I was going to come back.
Oh,
it was going to be
even bigger surprise.
It was going to be a 3-month trip for me to Colombia, Costa Rica, and Panama, and then back to Indianapolis to find a new lease because I was between leases. And 2 years later, I'm still here, and I don't really have any plans to go back to the United States for now. Sure, that might change in the future, but right now I am just loving life here in Latin America.
You were mentioning that one of the biggest reasons that you stayed in Colombia and then you decided to just, fuck it, I'm canceling my tickets. I'm not going to Costa Rica, Panama, where we had the tickets booked, and you stayed, was your girlfriend. Was she like the main anchor, or what else influenced your decision to stay and just not go back?
She was the main anchor. Yeah, she was the reason I stayed here in Colombia. Because of visa issues, I eventually did have to leave Colombia. And that's when I really began to explore a lot more in Latin America. I lived in 6 other countries in Central and South America: Costa Rica, Panama, Ecuador, Peru, Argentina, Uruguay. And I liked each of them, but obviously I have a life now here in Colombia. But apart from her, I love the entrepreneurial community here in Medellin. There are tons of expats, tons of nomads that come through here. More important to me is the expat community that is permanently here. There are so many different entrepreneurs and inspiring people that the business community really pulls me and attracts me. Apart from that, like I said, the people are so friendly, so welcoming, so kind and warm. I just love the culture here. I love it.
I can definitely relate. Like I said in the beginning, just when you get to Colombia, you just feel it like in the air. I don't know what is it, but there's just this energy that is so attractive, so welcoming. And, even though you may be from the other side of the world, it feels so positive there. I wanted
Yep,
to
I would
ask
echo that.
you, yeah, where do you think you would be if you didn't make this move?
I would not be still in Indianapolis. I know that. I would probably be somewhere in the United States, like Austin, Texas, or Raleigh, North Carolina. Those would probably be my top two cities in the U.S. Although over the last 2 years, my mind has changed in a lot of ways. I really prioritize like walkability, green environment. I need to be around trees. I need to be around nature. So for those reasons, I think Austin, Texas would be a awesome spot. Raleigh would also be a good spot. I'm not sure outside of those two where I would be.
I totally feel you. I've been considering it myself a lot lately because Miami is not a very walkable city, which is very annoying. Back in Poland, in my city called Wrocław, you don't need a car. There's a public transit everywhere. There are bus stops everywhere. So you can walk, take a public transit, and it's still good. Here, you cannot take a public transit, which is very, very annoying. And, being stuck in traffic and everything. I'll definitely consider that when I'll be picking my next location, when I'm planning on living in the future. So tell me, what have you learned about yourself from this journey so far?
Oh man. I didn't realize how important freedom was to me. I mean, I quit my job to control more in my life. I wanted more control over when I worked, how I worked, where I worked, all of that kind of stuff. But I didn't realize how important time was. And I'm learning that as I build a couple different businesses. I realized that instead of trading time for money, you want to build products that you can then sell in perpetuity. That's a really, really important learning for entrepreneurs. And I'm going through that process right now where I'm transitioning from a phase of my businesses where everything that I do requires my time and energy, versus I want to get to a place where I can build this product one time and then just sell that into perpetuity. And that doesn't require my time and energy as much. So leverage is a big deal when you're talking about entrepreneurship. And getting the most money out of your time is something that I'm still getting used to. But that's so critical to freedom. And I didn't realize that 2 years ago. I thought once I quit my job, I'm free. The handcuffs are gone and I can make as much money as I want and I can work wherever I want. But that's not freedom. Once you have that money, great. But if you're not able to spend your time and your money how you want to, and you have the time to spend with your loved ones and your family and doing really cool shit, then it doesn't matter. Then that money doesn't matter. So like I said, that's been a really big learning that I'm still kind of transitioning through.
How did you get started in like online business space? How did you get into it? How did you like even discover that there is this idea of making money online, working remotely, laptop lifestyle?
I was lucky enough to have a dad who was entrepreneurial. He was an orthodontist and just sold his practice. Congratulations to him on that. But inside of an orthodontics practice, you're the boss. You have to do all the marketing. You have to do all the sales. You have to make sure that customers are happy, customer service. You have to do the work and actually provide the service that makes people come back and talk to others and spread that word of mouth. So he taught me a lot about the value of owning your own business and the leverage that gives you. However, I didn't learn from him the online side of it, right? Because he was in person. He was giving those services to people in person. Something kind of tough to do digitally. I don't think you can install braces over the internet.
Maybe soon at one point.
Yeah, maybe. He brought me to, actually, you know what? Check out Invisalign. I don't know if that would qualify as over the internet, but it's a little bit different than traditional braces. Anyway, he brought me to a few conferences when I was in college that really opened my eyes to the world of creatorship. And to most people, that means nothing. But to me, it showed me that making money online was possible. If you could show people what you know, if you could teach people what you know and have them be better people because of it, if you could educate people and provide value over the internet and leverage the internet as a way to multiply your time, then you could make a living on the internet. And that to me was mind-blowing. I didn't know that that was possible. I didn't know that you could write a blog and make money on that. I didn't know you could send an email and make money on that. I didn't know you could make a YouTube video or a digital course or a PDF and make money off of that. Those were mind-blowing things for me. And I went to a conference with him by ConvertKit called Craft and Commerce in Idaho when I was probably the youngest one there. I was probably 18, 17, maybe 19. And that opened me to a whole new world of possibilities where I could work wherever I want, however I want, for money. And when I quit my job in 2021, that was the very beginning of my transformation to a creator. I wanted to build my own business and do that well enough so that 2 years later, I didn't think about it in the moment, but now I'm thinking about it, teach people how to do that and teach people how to quit their job, teach people how to grow a business, start a business from nothing and then grow that business, then travel the world. So now that this is my second business where I teach people about all those things over the internet. So it was really my dad that was the source of that inspiration. Even though he didn't work in that world, I think he always wished that he had that opportunity when he was younger to use the internet as leverage because he couldn't do that in orthodontics.
Yeah, I think it's so important to always have some kind of, or maybe not important, but like if you have it, you're so lucky to have like an influence of someone. I'm sure maybe your dad wasn't in the online space, but again, he opened up your mind to an idea. I can have my own business. And then since you are younger, you're more into like the technological side, you figured out, oh wait, I can have a business, but like do it online. So you definitely have been lucky with that. Congratulations to your dad on selling the practice. So with that being said, I found you on Twitter. I've been following your content for a while. You know, anytime I see your content, it's always just makes me smile because I see you being like so happy. You tell your whole story of how how this transition happened and just basically how happy you are living in Colombia. So tell me about how did you get started on Twitter and like why Twitter? Why, for example, not Instagram or TikTok or anything else?
First of all, I'll pass that congratulations on to my dad. Thank you, Ben. That was nice of you. Second of all, I'm a writer. I think I'm a natural born writer. I wouldn't say I'm good at writing, but I like writing. And because of that, I call myself a writer. So Twitter came naturally to me. It's a text-based platform versus Instagram, which is much more obviously visual-based, photo-based. I was lurking on Twitter for about a year and a half before I ever started posting. I didn't start posting until like March of 23. Before then, I was just using it as a tool to learn about the latest, greatest spots in Latin America, really. And I followed a little bit of the money Twitter folks and what they were up to. but didn't use it too much to my advantage. I was a consumer on the platform. Then in March of 23, I switched that mindset to much more of a producer and said, I'm on this platform. Maybe I spend 30 minutes a day on this platform. Why don't I start helping people and using that 30 minutes productively to meet other people, to help people do some of the stuff that I've done over the last years. So I shifted from a mindset of consumption to production, and Twitter was just naturally that first platform that I had access to because I was already on it. I wasn't on any other platforms. Now I'm sprinkling in YouTube, which is just a blast. I love video, and I think my journey, like you said, I like to be really authentic and open about my journey because I think it helps people more so than if I were anonymous. I don't think my story would have as much pull. I don't think it would help people as much if I weren't open about who I am, where I came from, what I'm doing, where I want to go. And YouTube is even more open, where you see my face, you get to learn who I am and what I'm about through the word, through verbal and just verbal arts. It's very different. So it's a big learning curve for me on YouTube. I'm not interested in Instagram. I'm not really interested in LinkedIn. Twitter and YouTube are the platforms for me right now. And you might also see a lot of the stuff that I write on Twitter is pretty much a duplicate from what I write on my website. So it's a lot of writing on those two different platforms, and a lot of what I do on YouTube is just that written content repurposed for a video format. Because it's hard for me to just riff out of nowhere like I'm doing on this podcast. This is definitely out of my comfort zone. So a lot of those are scripted, but we'll see in the future how that all plays out.
I don't think there's an issue with like scripting videos. I mean, I personally, I totally feel you because it's sometimes just like weird to turn on the camera and like start speaking, you know, there's no one there, whatever. It's just a different feeling. But I think like scripting is good maybe for like a frame for, okay, I want to say this is more or less the point I want to say. You know, obviously once you start recording, you just add to it. So tell me, with everything that you know now, if you had to do this move again, what would you do differently?
Good questions, Ben.
Probably you would say that do it faster, but let's count that out for a minute.
You know, one thing comes to mind, but are you talking specifically about any of the steps that I've taken?
I would say probably more in regards to you moving to South America. You know, because in the beginning, you said you just went there to travel. You probably didn't really look into how does visa work and everything. So you didn't have probably the idea. And with this whole transitioning to now building the base in Colombia, what would you do differently with all the knowledge that you have now?
Well, what I was actually imagining my answer to that question, when I was imagining an answer to that question, I wasn't thinking about that. So I'll share what I was thinking about before and get to the more travel-related part. I wish I had started writing on the internet sooner than I did. There's a big difference between writing and then publishing.
Oh yeah.
I've been writing for years. I've had a journal, not writing every day, but writing pretty regularly. But publishing was a whole different step for me and a discomfort that I had to get used to open myself up to criticism, open myself up to a lack of anonymity on the internet, to go from that consumption model, a consumption mindset to a production mindset. That was difficult. And I wish I had done that sooner because of the benefits of getting myself out there are just innumerous. I get to talk to people like you. I get to meet people like you. both online and offline in real life. I get to expand my network. I get to think about my thoughts more. I don't think people really realize the benefit of that until they experience it. If you're just in your head, you don't get to put all of those thoughts somewhere where, one, you get to read those thoughts, and two, other people get to comment on those thoughts, whether it's right or wrong. And because of that, I'm a smarter person. I have tougher skin than I did before. I have been proven wrong more than I would have ever liked to be proven wrong, but that's all a learning curve. And it's helped me more than it's hurt me. So I wish I had done that sooner. The second part of your question was more travel related. As it relates to travel, what would I have liked to do differently? I wish I had learned another language in these 2 years. Something I haven't gotten around to doing is learning Portuguese, and I really want to learn Portuguese. My experience of learning Spanish, and I'm lucky to be fluent now because I have daily conversation with my girlfriend who doesn't speak English. So you can imagine the first few dates were pretty brutal. Now that I'm fluent in Spanish, I want to be fluent in every language because I know that it opens my world to so many more people. 600 million people speak Spanish in the world, and now I have access to them. That's really cool. That's business networks. That's just being comfortable in a new environment. That's being able to read content and consume content that I previously wasn't able to consume. I wish I had learned Portuguese in that time as well. I don't know how hard learning 2 different languages is at the same time, but that's something that I'd like to do now, and I wish I had just started that sooner.
Yeah, I think also people don't realize how powerful Spanish is. I also haven't been really thinking about it until I got to Miami, and you go somewhere and even English doesn't work. Like, we're in America, and English is not good enough. I fortunately have a Cuban girlfriend, so she's also been teaching me some Spanish. It's very valuable, and even if you speak like broken Spanish and you go somewhere in Latin America, but you really try to speak the language, people look at you differently, and it's absolutely worth it.
Totally agree. People are more receptive. In the United States, I think that people should learn to speak our language. Miami is a whole different ballgame, so I'm not going to get into Miami because Latinos are the majority there.
Yeah.
But in the rest of the United States, Americans are very much the majority, and I think foreigners should learn English for that reason. When I'm here, I wanted to learn Spanish because I didn't want to be a hypocrite. I wanted to not be that typical American gringo that comes down to Latin America to live and not learn the language. That to me feels very hypocritical, very superior. Like I'm better than you. I don't need to learn your language. I can get around without learning a language. So it was a very big priority for me. I'm glad you touched on your Miami experience because that's very different from the rest of the United States.
Yeah, it was a big shock. Like, I thought I'm coming to United States, so it's all going to be English. But like I mentioned before, also the culture here is just so different. But honestly, I love it. It's like the best of both worlds. One bad thing I would say is I'm addicted to Cuban coffee now. It's really, I cannot do a day without it.
Now you got to try Colombian coffee.
Bro, I mean, I tried and I just didn't like it that much. I think Cuban coffee is superior.
Fair enough.
So do you think that having a Latina girlfriend is a cheat code to learning Spanish?
Yeah, 100%. Especially when she doesn't speak English. The small hacks like Duolingo, like changing your phone language to Spanish, like watching YouTube and Netflix and all other kinds of content in Spanish, downloading podcasts in Spanish, they have very diminishing returns. So you'll get to about a 20% learning capacity from those little small hacks, but nothing will get you more fluent faster than daily conversation, one, and two, full immersion. I'm lucky to have both of those things with really easy access. One, I have a girlfriend who doesn't speak English, so I had to learn Spanish. That's daily conversation right there. Two, I live in a place where I can't speak my first language. People don't speak English here. So I'm thrust into this society where my life is better if I learn this other language. So I had to for those two different reasons. And that forcing function, that really helps. Sure, a Latina girlfriend really helps, but also thrusting yourself into a society where you have to learn, that really, really helps as well. The small hacks help a little bit, but you're just not going to get to a conversational or fluent status by using them.
I know we're running short on time, so I have two more questions. So in your podcast with Francisco from Ages of Innovation, you guys were talking about treating countries as corporations, and basically having like your passport and being a citizen is like just being a member, and taxes are kind of like membership fees. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? I think it's a very interesting concept, and I really haven't thought about it that way. I think what I want you to like maybe talk about is like, that people are not only limited to being the citizen of one country. So if, for example, if they don't like the laws or whatever, they can always go somewhere else. They can become a member in a different country.
Yeah, I recently dropped a podcast, a YouTube video on what exactly a nationality stack is, and that's what I'll get into in a second. But if you want like a full dive, you can go check that out on my YouTube channel. But what Francisco and I were talking about is The Sovereign Individual, which is a book written back in the 90s, an extremely prophetic book. Not pathetic, prophetic, meaning they predicted things that no one could have ever predicted in 1997 or whenever that book was written in the 90s.
99.
Ended up
I actually got this book after this interview.
Really?
Yeah.
And a lot of their predictions ended up becoming true. For example, cryptocurrency. Nobody would have, that was such a far-fetched concept in the 90s that we would use the internet to build blockchains and a new form of money that would be separate from these governments that they posited were manipulating our money sources and our monetary assets. That's just one example of one of the many predictions that they made that ended up becoming true. In that book, they talk about treating countries as companies, as corporations, and explaining that because we pay taxes, we're like customers to them. That without customers, without tax-paying citizens, countries can't operate, right? So very much like what you were talking about, like a country club, we are paying members of that country club. And if we don't want the benefits from this country club or that company, that corporation, go find another. Renouncing is very difficult, so that there's a little disconnect there, especially if you're a U.S. citizen. But every company, every country in the world has its features, has its characteristics that you're able to choose from. Where are you happiest? Where are you wealthiest? Where do you feel freest? Those are the things that really matter. And if you're willing to pay the taxes in another jurisdiction, another country, then why not make that leap? In my video where I talk about building a nationality stack, I talk about how we should compare countries to items at the grocery store. When you're picking out fruits, you're thinking about price, you're thinking about nutritional facts, you're thinking about the color, you're thinking about how many, well, maybe that one doesn't really work. You're thinking about brand, you're thinking about all these different things. And that's, I think, the way that we should think about companies. We should think about their taxes. We should think about their business climate. We should think about how powerful their passport is in terms of visa-free access around the world. And for those reasons, you should be able to move around the world and build a more robust nationality stack. You should be able to get more residencies and visas and citizenships to make sure that you live the best life you can possibly live. So they talked about that in the Sovereign Individual a little bit. They talked about that, or we talked about that on the podcast with Francisco. Yep. And then I also talked about that in my recent YouTube video. I think it's really important that young people realize that you're not trapped where you grew up. If you are healthier, if you are happier, if you are wealthier, if you're freer in another land, then why not take advantage and move there? Why not take advantage and get a visa there, residency there, citizenship there? It's also it's also a really good idea to diversify your nationality stack and make sure that when something like 2020 happens again, you have options and you're not forced into a box. Your migration routes aren't cut off. You're not forced to do things that you're not willing to do. Your bank accounts aren't frozen for any particular reason. Diversification is a really good way to minimize risk in that scenario.
Absolutely. Listen, James, I still have so many questions for you. We definitely have to do a part 2, maybe in Miami, maybe in Colombia. So my last one question is, I ask this question to every single guest. So the name of the podcast is Better Globally. We explore art of becoming better, how to become better in life, health, relationships, in every area in your life. So what would you say is your number one tip to become better globally?
My number one tip to become better globally would be to explore life outside of your home country and to see if you're a happier, healthier, freer person somewhere other than where you were born.
Okay, you guys heard him. I usually also give a book to every single guest, but since you're not here, I'll give it to you once we meet each other in person.
Awesome, Ben. I'm looking forward to it already.
Thank you, James, for all the wisdom, for all the knowledge that you shared with the viewers. I learned a lot. I'm really looking forward to part 2. So thanks again. It was a great time, and we definitely have to do it again.
Awesome, Ben. Thanks.
Thank you so much.